Hello. Oh, hi everyone. Um, yeah, I'm Alvin, and this is Gabriel, and welcome to the SDN Community Voices special. And yeah, this is a program where we can chat with service design practitioner to bring you fresh and insightful viewpoints. And our goal is to help service designer learn and stay updated on the latest trends. So yeah, today we're going to explore the topic of systematic change in service design with our special guest, Alessandra. Hi, Alessandra. And yeah, Alessandra is a Brazilian-born service designer. Oh, hi. Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, let me briefly introduce you first. Yeah, and yeah, Alessandra is a Brazilian-born service designer based in Germany. She's currently an associate service design director at Steinberg, one of Germany's leading creative agencies. With over 15 years of experience, Alessandra has worked with multidisciplinary teams across Brazil, Italy, Finland, and Germany, tackling complex systematic challenges and drive digital innovations. And she's passionate about applying her service design skills to create sustainable, impactful solutions in new contexts. So yeah, before we get started, for everyone tuning in live, we encourage you to actively participate in the conversation and share your comments below. Yeah. So Alexandra, hey, welcome, and thank you for joining us today. And for those who may not know you well yet, could you start by briefly introduce yourself and sharing a bit about your journey into service design? Thank you.
Hi. Hi, for sure. Thank you, Alvin. So, as you said, I'm Alessandra. I currently work as an associate service design director at Denkwerk. So, I have a small team of designers that I lead in different projects, and our focus is mostly the digital world. So, how can we make an impact through digital solutions? And before joining Denkwerk, as you said, I started in Brazil. My studies were in industrial design, but I realized very early on that designing products was not my passion, and joined the research for design and sustainability in the university, where at the time we were developing a lot of product service system projects also associated with the industry. And this led me to join another research center at Politecnico di Milano in Italy. Um, and when I moved back to Brazil, I knew of product service systems, but I still didn't know of service design. And that's where I met Professor Birgit Mager. She was giving a talk at one university. I was joining another event for, and that motivated me to move to Germany and do my master's in service design. At the time, my focus was strongly on how service design can foster collaboration and improve communications. And this whole background led me to Finland, where I was working in a consultancy for ethnographic research. So I was not designing things, but I was researching how people in different cultures were perceiving things, were going through their daily lives. So, for instance, we had a big project in 4 countries about gardening, and it was all about the relationships people have with gardenings and the tools they use for it. Um, and then when I moved back to Germany, I joined Denkwerk, and I had the immense pleasure of being the first service designer to join the team. And my role at the beginning was fostering the mindset, being an evangelist, and helping develop how our service design offering should be, but also using the service design methodology to redesign our internal processes and to make people more aware of the impact we could reach with it.
Okay, yeah, that sounds like a fascinating journey. And yeah, it's great to hear how your background in design influenced your approach to service design. But speaking of your international experience, I think this brings us to our next questions. You mentioned you've worked in like various countries like Brazil, Italy, Finland, and Germany. And can you share a like case study from your experience that demonstrate how you apply service design principle to drive the systematic change?
Yeah, sure. So, as I said, my background before coming to Germany was strongly focused on sustainability. That means I was working on classical or more classical systemic topics than I am at the moment. For instance, um, my last project before coming to Germany was based on a government policy to reduce taxes for houses that had rainwater harvesting systems. And we saw an opportunity to work with a big business partner, so one of the biggest tube production companies in Latin America, and to connect them to low-income communities in Brazil, and to deliver a solution or to design a solution together that involved the product service system for helping these families also collect or harvest rainwater. And it was super fascinating because we had to first investigate these communities and understand their knowledge of rainwater harvesting and how they went about their lives and who was involved in the process. And then we had to also balance the business and production side. So how can you produce such a system? How can you make something that's easy and modular and that can be installed without a lot of effort? And this led us to to design a new business model, a product line, but also concepts for sales system, services and maintenance services. And everything was based on creating like this strong connection between the community and the company. So that means we saw the community not only as consumers or users, but also as possible partners in working in these maintenance services. That means we also had to consider how you train these people to work and install and maintain things for the company and to connect them. But since I'm here in Germany, I get much more classical or classic briefings that's mostly about how can we digitalize analog services, how can we improve the digital experience from different user groups, which doesn't mean you cannot do it systemically, right? So one good example I have is a couple of years ago, we were tasked with developing research about the different business clients for a large telecommunication company here in Germany. And it involved understanding how companies from one employee until, I don't know, 5,000, 10,000 employees work. How are they buying solutions? How are they using it? How are they making supporting services for that? So it was a lot about understanding these roles and these connections between the companies and our client, and then transferring this knowledge for different project teams. So coordinating and orchestrating to make sure that they were all aligned, that they all had this perspective of the different user groups they had, and to make sure that what they were working on was really developing or delivering the value they expected to have.
Yeah. It sounds really interesting. So I would like to build on what you just mentioned. Have you applied like any framework during your design process? Like, could you share about some of them?
You mean framework for this kind of project? I mean, I think it's
Yeah.
a lot about looking a bit beyond what we usually look as service designers. So usually we're very focused on who's using or who has like the primary interaction and connection to the solutions we're developing, and we are not looking a bit beyond that. So who are other stakeholders, for instance, who can influence or impact the solution you're developing, and who else might be being involved in the use, right? So I think it's about looking for ways you can map the context. So using, for instance, system maps or stakeholder maps to understand the larger context in which you're operating, trying to understand a bit more of the mental models and the dynamics that make things the way they are. So this is the kind of approach we usually use.
Okay, yeah, it's good to hear how this kind of approach to service design can lead us to the impactful change. And yeah, I know you're also planning to share more like these systematic changes at upcoming conference. So can you share with us the main elements you plan to introduce in the presentation to the
Yeah, of course.
SDNGC? Yeah.
So my focus with the presentation is encouraging service designers to adopt this systemic mindset in their projects. Even if you're working with a limited briefing or a limited frame, as I just mentioned, I think that although we are not all working on systemic topics, we all have an influence on them. And we can nudge systems towards a desired state. We can envision futures that are better than the ones we are fearing to achieve in the near time. And we can also design not only the solutions or the touch points or the services we are asked for, but the context for the change to happen. So my focus with the presentation is really talking about how we need to move beyond understanding these individual interactions we usually look at, but understanding the system dynamics, understanding the context, and putting a lot of emphasis on understanding before we design something, and consider how we can, with our solutions, also investigate the negative forces or what causes the status quo to not be as sustainable or as fair or as inclusive as we would like to, and what we can do with our work, even in our limited frame, to mitigate these causes, and to work on things that really have a positive impact towards a future vision we want to have.
Okay. Yeah, you just mentioned, yeah, sounds like really lots of powerful frameworks. And you just mentioned that when we're facing some limitation, like what kind of frameworks or how would you do to deal with it?
So as I said, I think it's about the mindset you adopt in the project. So it's basically about looking a bit further than what you would normally and doing a bit more of research and engaging your stakeholders in that. I'll give you an example of what happened in this project I was talking about for the communication company. One of the tasks one of the teams had was to design, design online services to reduce the cost of call centers. So we all know a lot of people call the service center. It costs a lot. It depends on a lot of people. It would be easier and cheaper and faster if people would just log in and wait on a digital platform. And that led us to investigating how the current system in the call center is. And I think that usually the approach would be, okay, you understand the pains, you understand why people are calling, and you try to translate it to the digital world. But in some cases, it doesn't work. For instance, in our research, we identified a dynamic that was the following. People in smaller companies, they call the call center when they want to renegotiate their contract. So I think we all know that. People would just call and say, I'm quitting, I'm going to the competitor unless you offer me something better. And on the other hand, we realized that the call center had a problem that to answer to these calls, they would have to switch between a lot of different tools. So they didn't have a streamlined line process. They had like 3 or 4 different tools they had to open and connect and investigate. And this dynamic would go something like this. At the end of the month, that's like when you have to cancel your contract, a lot of people would call. And then you would have a lot of waiting lines in the call center because attending to each of these calls takes a lot of time. You're switching between tools. And this makes the work that they do seem very inefficient. So if you just look from your traditional, we solve the problem view, you probably say we just do an online solution that says, hey, your contract is ending in the next month. Here is an offer so you can stay with us. But this doesn't work because you're not addressing the dynamic and you're not addressing the mindset. So the mindset is just, if I talk to someone, they will be able to do something better than what the system does. So I think that this kind of reflection and understanding of the context is important. So you make sure that you're not designing something that's just like a band-aid, that's just like trying to solve a thing that's not solvable in that way.
Yeah, it really sounds like an uphill battle for your experience. Yeah, like how could server design address these different kind of dynamic and yeah, what's the approach, how should it be? Yeah, and yeah, let's move on to the next question is, you've often talked about the importance of measuring the impact of the design, and what do you think the key metrics or methods service designer can use to assess these kind of systematic impact of their solutions?
There is not one answer to the question. I think that the important thing is the metrics need to reflect the purpose, so the kind of change you're trying to promote. So probably after you did all this investigation, you realized what's the future state you want to achieve, like what's the impact you're trying to create with your solutions, you need to consider what kind of metrics can help you indicate if the system is moving towards the desired direction you want. My suggestion would be trying to combine qualitative metrics to evaluate, like, how is your intervention or your solution affecting these connections and these dynamics in the system? Is it creating new dynamics? Is it enabling new synergies? Is it making the system work in a more healthy way, or work in a more efficient way? But also combine that with quantitative metrics so that you can see, like, how far your impact is reaching, like how far into the system are you going, what's the rippling effect. And I think that most important than what metrics, or not most important than what metrics, the metrics are super important, but as important as the metrics is also understanding how people involved in creating and measuring these metrics are being informed. So are they aligned with your purpose? Are they aware of what they are working towards, or are they just trying to crunch numbers? Because this can change completely the way things happen, right? Especially if people are getting some kind of benefit from these metrics, or from achieving these numbers. So for instance, if we look back at this example from the call center, if we say the metric is just like we need to shorten the time spent per call, and the work or the employment from the call center people, or how their progress in their career is being evaluated is dependent on that, it would be very easy for them, when the call is getting too long, to just cut the call short and say call back again. Or so instead of solving the problem, it would be easier just to make the calls shorter by saying, yeah, we are having technical problems, and make the people call 5 times or something like this. And if instead of that we say the metric should be, we need to improve the time it takes to solve the customer issue, then we could start saying, like, how are the tools delaying or improving the time? How are we serving the people through different channels, and how satisfied are them with the outcomes? And then we may start seeing, like, that we're nudging the system towards this state of taking less time to answer to a problematic issue.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and I think it's really important to combine like different methods to get a fuller picture of the impact. Just as you mentioned, not only just qualitative, maybe also quantitative, like to see how can we get the bigger picture of it. Yeah. So okay, let's move on to the last question. Is for service designer looking into create these kind of systematic impact with constraints, such as limits, scope, or resources. What kind of strategies or advice would you recommend?
I think the first thing we need to do is change the way we look at things. So instead of just focusing on these interactions between people and touch points, or between front stage and backstage, we need to start looking at what are the relevant connections that happens not only within the service we're designing, but also around it. So who else is being affected? Who else is somehow in contact to this? And what kind of dynamics dictate the behavior of people interacting with the touch points and the services we are creating? So, as I said, I think that the important thing is knowing we can create context, we can influence context, we can design new futures. And for that, we need to be more aware of how we can do that and what kind of impact we can reach with that. That means we need to be very intentional about designing context, and not only designing short-term solutions that are not addressing these larger dynamics. One other thing, I think we are very good at collaboration, and that's exactly what we need. So if you're trying to map this larger context and to adopt this broader perspective in your project, bring people in, bring the relevant stakeholders in, make them map with you, make them understand the impact you want to achieve, make them design the future state, like what's the goal together with you. And then use your storytelling skills, for instance, to explain what your research is telling you in a way that you can translate complexity to a level that's clear for everyone. Use your future visioning skills to create a shared purpose, and try to maintain this shared understanding of what's the larger impact we want to achieve, what's the future state we want to go to, and what's necessary to get there. And one point that I think is super relevant and we don't often do is I think we need to become much more aware of the possible negative impact we can create in the systems by solving something we consider a problem. I think that we need to be able to foresee what could happen, what could go wrong, so that we are able to react or to create countermeasures, or if we can't do both, at least to consider what would be the lesser negative impact we can create.
Yeah, I totally agree. And yeah, also one of our audience just say that 100% mindset are bigger than framework. Yeah, I also wanted to add on that. Yeah, I think it's really important, just as you mentioned, how do we take a long view to the whole picture, and how we leverage our collaboration skills and also communication skills. How can we align what we want to do to our stakeholders, and also meanwhile leveraging our like future design skill and different, like how do we persuade those stakeholders. I think that is quite really important. Is like kind of like not just focus on like hard skill, it's more like the soft skills. So yeah, totally agree with what you say. And really thank you for those like practical and insightful discussions. So we have covered a lot of great topics today, and I'm sure that our audience has some questions for you. So let's move on to our Q&A sessions. So now we can, because due to some time constraints, we were able to answer like 1 or 2 questions today. So if you have question, please comment. Hi everyone. Does anyone have any questions? Let me read through Sydney's mention. I feel there's an emphasis on toolbox and ready-made solutions. It's great to hear someone reminding that this virtual by mindset. The tools will follow eventually. Okay, I think I can add on what I have some further questions. Maybe like do you have any recommend like toolkits or some online resources to recommend to us?
There are many. The first recommendation, I even have it here beside me, is this book. It's called Closing the Loop by Sheryl Kababa, and I think it's very practical and very design driven. I think that's the big difference to most of the literature you have on systems thinking, but also you have things like design journeys through complex systems. That's another very, very good book that's based on the system design toolkit that you can find online. I think the biggest difference is designing journeys through complex systems is really focusing on systemic projects. So how do you work on the big frame? And Sheryl Kababa is more reflecting on how you can apply the systemic mindset to different kinds of projects you might be involved in. There is a systemic design community. They have also a lot of nice input and information. You can check them out. So I think that there's also the System Mapping Academy. They have very nice system mapping trainings, for instance, and they really focus also on not only doing a stakeholder map, but visualizing these different dynamics. So those would be my first go-tos.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Yeah, because previously I also have learned some system thinkings, and I found that there's kind of different with like design thinking or other different thinking strategy skills. Could you like share about is there any difference with between system thinkings and design thinking, and yeah, your learning journey? Thank you.
Yes, I think they're very different, but they have parts that can be combined. So my biggest issue with design thinking is that you're always looking already for a solution. So it's very solution oriented. It sometimes is very also already driven by a certain technology. So you sort of have a closed frame, and you're investigating for that closed frame. So I think the biggest difference from and it's also sometimes looking at things very linearly, right? So you're just looking like how people go from A to B while interacting with what you're designing. Um, and I think that these are some limitations of design thinking, but there are also very many good things like working collaboratively, prototyping and testing your solutions. So for me, the ideal state would be combining like this mindset and this perspective of looking for the larger context and really understanding that things are not linear. So they're constantly influencing and changing each other. There's impact being distributed, that things don't work in isolation, right? And I think
Yeah,
it's really important to understand that before you move into looking what you want to solve. So what's the real problem you want to address, and how can you solve it? And from there on, when you have like this when you have this view of the context and of the system, you can use your design thinking skills to start intervening and thinking like, how do you solve, or not solve, but how do you address these challenges, and how you can create small experiments and test if the system reacts the way you want, and so on. So that would be my advice: combine both of them.
yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I think it's really important to like stay flexible. Like it's also kind of the core skill for a designer. Like how can we identify which skills could be combined and which may not to do. So yeah, it's really important to stay flexible. And oh, okay, thank you, Sudensha. Oh, she typed down those different books and resources. Yeah, thank you,
Thank you.
thank you.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think yeah, that's all the time we have for Q&A today. So thank you so much, Alessandra, like for sharing your valuable insight with us today. And yeah, it was truly inspiring to hear about your experience and perspective on systematic change in service design. So yeah, I'm sure that our audience may have gained a lot from your expertise. And yeah, and everyone, the audience, don't forget that Alessandra will present her thoughts on the topic called Agents of Systematic Change to the SDNGCG. Yeah, see the QR code here. Yeah, and yeah, the conference will be held in October. So yeah, and for the audience, if you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to fill out the feedback form below. Yeah, and your feedback will help us to improve and tailor our content to meet your needs. So yeah, upon next, so I'm doing the closing is until next time, keep exploring and stay curious. And really thank you again, Alessandra, like give us lots of insight and inspiring moments. Yeah, and
Thank
yeah,
you.
thank
Thank you
you
for
all for
having.
yeah, and thank you all for being here, and see you in the next episode of the SDN Community Voices Special. And we'll say goodbye now.
Bye. Thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you.